Good evening and good to have you with us in the 9 p.m. edition of the Urban Debate. Viewers, Twitter now was one of the first channels to start highlighting the plight and the problems of our migrants, our migrant workers, as the lockdown hit us. We constantly tracked it for week after week as the situation didn't seem to improve at all, despite assurances from state governments and from the center. Until finally the decision was made to start some trains for the migrant workers and then some state government buses, and then we reached a point where almost each single migrant worker who wanted to go home had pretty much, in some or the other manner, reached home. But those few weeks were painful. To day after day, see how they were struggling at those centers, jobless, without money, without food, without water, without any information of how they'll get home, how hundreds of them got out on streets, on roads, and simply began to walk back home, irrespective of whether that home was 50 kilometers away or 500 kilometers away. We covered that migrant exodus exhaustively as we questioned each state government and the central government on what they were planning to do to help these people. Tonight, I bring this back one more time because since then, there has been the issue of migrants jobless, governments trying to provide them job, trying to provide them food, of the migrants now beginning to come back to the big cities. And so there are many unanswered questions. And some of these questions were actually raised in the parliament, were asked in the parliament. Now, I want to take you through these questions and the answers given by the government, because I believe it truly shows you just how much importance we gave to these crores of people who live in our country, literally build our nation, and still go unnoticed every single day. To the question that was asked, why did thousands of migrants end up walking home? The central government said it was due to panic. They were in a state of panic because of fake news regarding the lockdown duration, and that they weren't too sure. They were concerned about supplies, about whether they will have enough food, enough water, enough essential necessities, which is why they began to walk home. At no point is there an admission that states and center failed to take care of them. I don't understand what this fake news is about the lockdown duration, because essentially the lockdown did go on for several weeks and got extended multiple times. So what was the fake news that the government is referring to? I don't know. When asked why did so many migrants walk home, they said because of the panic created by fake news. When asked how many migrants died on their way home, government said data has not been maintained by us. We don't know how many of them died on their way home. When asked have migrants received financial assistance, government said 42 crore people have received financial assistance. 68,000 crore has been spent as financial assistance. When asked how many daily wagers lost their job, there was no specific answer, only a list of the various schemes that have been launched. Now, I don't know what's the, how these schemes are being implemented and for whom, when we don't know how many of them were rendered jobless because of the lockdown. When asked what was the loss suffered by farmers, government said no income assessment report is available. When asked about the food distribution target for migrants specifically under the Atmanirbhar Bharat scheme, government said while there was no target or data on actual number of migrants available, there is an estimate that about 8 crore was done. When asked why is the center not maintaining a database over migrant deaths, government had no answers. So here is my simple question. Is it fair to blame fake news for the fact that these migrants started to walk home? Fake news made them so desperate, and what kind of fake news? That tomorrow they won't get food? But wasn't that a reality in many parts? Is it fair to really say that the panic was created because somebody told them about the duration of the lockdown, when in reality the lockdown did get extended multiple times, so that wasn't even false information, even if somebody fed them that information? And today, months later, if we are not able to give clear answers on number of jobs lost by the daily wage workers, on how many of them actually managed to get and avail food and financial assistance by the government schemes, then are we really sure we have successfully managed to take care of all of them? Or did we not learn any lessons from day one? Let's say good evening to the panelists, and I will present to you more information as we proceed, because a lot has been given and written to the parliament that often goes unnoticed. But these are government answers that I'm quoting to you. These are as real as facts can be. Let's say good evening to Mahesh, Tapase, spokesperson for the NCP, Rajiv Ranjan, spokesperson for the Janata Dal United, RP Singh, national secretary for the BJP, and Supriya Srinath, national spokesperson for the Congress party, joining us this evening. Mr. RP Singh, I don't know if you can help us understand. I didn't understand what was this fake news that the government is referring to.
Tanvi, first, I won't be able to add much what has been said by the minister in the parliament, but as far fake news goes, because I have faced it in my constituency here in Delhi, the fake news was that you will never be allowed to go back, and you will be locked up here, and you will finish here. I mean, you won't be allowed to go back home ever. So this was there, and then in that, and I'm talking about specifically case in Delhi, there were buses being provided to people to go to the borders. I remember special buses being arranged by the Delhi government to go to the border, to show that the labor goes to the border, and from there onward, however they want to go, whenever they want to go, they could have gone. So there's a complete chaos being created by the state government here in Delhi. I'm sorry, I can't say what happened in other states, but this is probably this would have happened in other states also. And as far I went through your package, which you said earlier also, that as far data goes of how many deaths occurred in states while people are walking back. See, all this is a state subject. We'll appreciate Rajasthan government or UP government or Madhya Pradesh government. They should come out with the data, how many people migrants who are walking back died on the way. That data, they should come out with the data as well, the death score. But thirdly, you spoke about how many people received the benefit of the package of the Garib Kalyan. You yourself said that it's almost 8 crore people who got the benefit of the Garib Kalyan, where I know about city in Delhi that ration was sent, but still ration was not distributed. Only 1/10 ration, Delhi government could only distribute 1/10 of the ration which was sent for the poor in Delhi. And we kept making noise for that, requesting Delhi government to please ensure that ration should go. And it was said also that not merely people with the ration card, even people without ration card, that ration should go to them. The basic needs of the food should be fulfilled for them. But that didn't happen. But we all know that didn't happen in Delhi, and that would have been true with other states also. I can't say about other states, but that could have been true for other states also. So there's a chaos and a panic which was created for certain reason, and then now people have started coming back also. I mean, I know in Punjab in specific and Delhi in specific that people have started coming back to their respective jobs and coming back to the states also.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, we spoke to a couple of them recently. They actually spoke about how bad things were back home. And so, you know, the first opportunity they got, they ran back to the cities where they had been told that, you know, work would now be available because situation was worse, if not equally bad, back home than these big cities. But again, Mr. RP Singh, before I go to the other panelists, I didn't understand this. You say that, you know, specifically true. For example, let's take your constituency where people were being told that you won't be allowed to go home because there will be a complete lockdown. But that was the truth. What's the fake news in that? Nobody was allowed to travel. That was the lockdown.
You're right. You're right. The initial lockdown was for certain period, but they were told that it was for a certain period. Until that time, no one knew that how long the lockdown will continue, how long the thing will go on. We only knew it's only for initial 21 days, and we thought it would be over by then. But in that 21 days, only on the 14th day, it was said, oh, you are stuck here, you will never go back home. Whereas states, when center was providing them the facilities, but it was not been forwarded to them, to the poor. Had they ensured that what has been provided by the center being forwarded to the poor, then poor would have stayed back. Why shall they try to go back? Because it was a panic created that, and I'm telling you, On record, you can go through your library. You can see there were buses being provided by Delhi government. There were buses which are towing them to, and not that to ensure that they go to the last point, only to the bus station, to the borders, to the ISBT, or to the Anand Vihar bus station, the last stations. I'm saying that okay, you can go from here how you want to go back. I have to first. I remember in one of the cases, I have to one of the night I have to go personally and tell people, say you please come back. I mean, we will ensure that you get food. We'll send you food, and that's why BJP started providing food from the party level. I mean, because state governments were
Okay. Let me bring in our other panelists. I think largely a lot of the state governments weren't able to do a good enough job of providing them assurance or food and security, which is why their fear and their panic was, even more intensified. But let me ask this question to Mahesh Tapase. Mr. Mahesh Tapase, is it fair to say, are we taking away from the real plight of these daily wage workers or migrant workers by saying they simply fell for fake news?
Good evening, Tanvi and all panelists and viewers. I think it's one of the funniest answers that I must have heard, and that too coming from people in responsible positions, to say that the entire exodus of migrant workers happened because of the fake news is something I am just not able to digest that. We all know that the country has been in the lockdown mode since the 25th of March. And simultaneously, nobody knew that when the lockdown will be over. And in this case, people have been trying to communicate with the masses. The Prime Minister has come on television on various occasions. The government has been trying to put across various messages, whether it's the state government or the central government. Nobody for sure knew that on which day the lockdown will get over. The first phase was extended, the second phase was extended, the third phase was extended. And as we all rightly know, that anybody staying away from his house, not knowing when the lockdown will end, was definitely in fear for his own family. The families were calling the laborers, the migrant workers to come back and join them. And there was no communication as to how the workers will travel. My state of Maharashtra, my Deputy CM Mr. Ajit Pawar had written to the Railway Minister asking him permission to start the railways, because maximum number of migrant workers from UP, from MP, from Bihar are working in the state of Maharashtra. And hence we had requested the government as early as May to start, or slightly maybe before that, to start the railways so that these migrant workers could travel back to the respective natives. But that was not given much importance at that point of time. Finally, the government agreed to start the Shramik trains. There was confusion. I'm sure Mr. R.P. Singh would be able to enlighten us how the 15% and the 85% share between the state and the central, as far as the railway revenues were there. How much money has your government collected from the states? R.P. Singh ji, I'm sure you can give us the numbers. Today you couldn't tell how many people have died while traveling back to their natives. The government doesn't have figures. They said that we don't have a central agency to have the data collated. So these kind of answers are definitely not warranted. These kind of answers are something we don't want. We want clear-cut answers.
Well, there is no central data agency. Because we've never thought about it. Mr. Mahesh Tapase, no party has ever thought about it, how to figure, how to keep a track, how to help them. We've announced many schemes, but we don't know how those schemes are actually working on ground. There is... Okay, and let me come back to you. Let me just get opening comments from the other two panelists and I will come back to you. Supriya Srinin, is it fair to take away from the plight of the daily wage workers and the laborers by saying, well, they were doing fine except that, they fell for fake news and they started to panic, which is why they ran home?
14 minutes into this program, and one thing I can tell you with all honesty at my behest is that the BJP is not just reckless, insensitive, but they don't even understand the plight of the migrant labor. First, they tell the parliament we don't have numbers of people who died. Then they said they fell for fake news. When will they accept that they never thought about the migrant labor? When will they accept that the Solicitor General lied before the Supreme Court and said not a single man is on the street? When will they accept for the fact that till it dawned on them that Bihar elections are close on the corner, they did not even think about the migrant labor? When will they accept the fact that they had to accept in the Supreme Court that they did not pay for the fare of a single migrant labor on a sworn affidavit. So, these are things that we can go back and forth on. The reality is that this was a reckless lockdown announced without any consultation. People were left without work, without food, without opportunity, without money. And please understand, in the time of a pandemic like this, in a crisis like this, everybody wants to run to the confines and comfort of their family because this is an unknown enemy. One doesn't know how this is going to end. And why should migrant laborers be told that because you panicked, you ran away? Everybody went to their places. Just because you are rich, you can go, and because you're poor, you can't. This government is not just reckless, it is insensitive to the core. And Mr. R.P. Singh, he spoke for 7 minutes, 45 seconds, and I timed him. He did not once apologize to the migrant workers. This government and the party should apologize to what happened. The kind of plight and the kind of travesty we saw on Indian roads and expressways and highways. Look at those pictures that you're showing on your channel. People with old parents on their shoulders, women delivering on the way, children walking thousands of kilometers. We owe an apology to this nation. Instead, we are saying they fell for fake news. I mean, this is the travesty of justice of any kind.
Mr. R.P. Singh, would you want to respond to that before I go to Rajiv Ranjan?
8 minutes 13 seconds. 8 minutes. I was also counting 8 minutes 13 seconds. But as per my co-panelist from NCP, sir, do you remember person named Vinay Dubey? Why was he arrested by the Maharashtra government, if you remember? And what was the reason for him to be arrested by the Maharashtra government? So, because he was spreading fake news, and he gathered people at the Bandra station for them to be sent back to state.
What happened in Surat? What happened in Surat? What happened in Ghaziabad? What happened in Surat?
There will be many more leaders of NCP and other friends like Mr. Vinay Tiwari, who would have done, Vinay Dubey, who would have done similar activity. And there will be people in Delhi also who would have done a similar activity. If you want, I can name and shame all of them if you want to. And most of them will belong to Congress party or other parties, or right parties. Let's understand this and let's appreciate that, because you are doing a political activity and you have to do it because of the political objectives and political reasons. And then I also remember the Punjab government saying that we will provide for the fare. I mean, the Congress party will provide for the fare. None of them provided for the fare. They just went to the railway station and did some show off at certain 10-15 people and did some photo of on WhatsApp, and that was all over. The fact is that there is crisis. There is still crisis. I'm not saying the crisis is over. We are facing the crisis. We are fighting the crisis. It's the economic crisis. It's the medical emergency also. Is the health emergency also. So we are fighting it back. But in that, saying that the government didn't took care of them, sir, government ensured that food being sent for 8 crore people to respective state governments, which was to be distributed to the state government. It was government which ensured that. And also back home...
No, Mr. R.P. Singh, I still have not understood. Mr. R.P. Singh,
where is the statistics? Why it's not coming out in the parliament?
Sir, you never argued about Vinay Dubey. Sir, you have right.
Why the statistics? Why are not told in the parliamentary address?
Okay, one at a time, please. One at a time. One at a time. 10 more seconds to R.P. Singh to finish. And then we go to other panelists. Yes, R.P. Singh, finish your point. Yes,
sorry,
10 more seconds.
I'm sorry, they can go ahead with the debate. I lost the track, what I want to say. They can go ahead with the debate point now. I'm sorry, I'll answer it when it comes again.
Okay, Mr. R.P. Singh, but if you say that the state governments fail to take care of them, I am willing to accede to that point. Yes, of course, there may be states who didn't take care of the migrants who were there. In states like Maharashtra, there was a huge number of these people and they struggled in the initial days just like everybody else because it was an unprecedented situation. The point is that the centre's argument was fake news. And not that we failed to anticipate or it took us time to prepare. It took time for the states to prepare shelters and provide them food, which is why this happened. Centre's first answer was fake news and panic because of fake news, which is unfair. That's the point. Yes. Supriya, you wanted to make a point?
What's up, Mr. Vinay Dubey?
Taking another leap of
Sorry?
Mr. Vinay Dubey putting a Facebook post is not going to trigger a fake news panic amongst lakhs and crores of migrant workers. Mr. RP is saying they were genuinely in a bad place. They were genuinely in a tough position. They didn't immediately on day one of the lockdown. On day one of the lockdown, they didn't start working home. They didn't start working home until there was a lockdown extension. Let me make it very clear. Apart from the Anand Vihar bus stand situation, the large percentage of the migrant exodus only happened when the lockdown had been extended. Only happened when they ran out of money, when they could see that the jobs are not coming back anytime soon. That's when, out of helplessness, hunger and poverty, they started to walk back home. So please, let's not disregard the plight of the migrants at that point of time.
Can I
have a very small point to make. Can I please come in for a second?
Can I say something, Tanvi, before ma'am come in? I'm accepting there was a problem, there was a chaos. I am accepting that, but that was primarily because center provided for all of them and asked the states to do it, but states failed to fulfill the required as far as the migrant labor go. They should have Rajasthan. Let's talk about. We know. How about Rajasthan? When people were carried in bus and thrown on the border. People are carried from the...
Okay. Mr. RP Singh, I'm also having a little bit of trouble with your video. I'm going to fix that. And I will request Mr. Rajiv Ranjan to be patient for just 2 more minutes. Let Supriya respond to this and I'm coming to you then, Mr. Rajiv Ranjan. Yes, Supriya.
My simple point, Tanvi, is that we can go back and forth on mudslinging and Mr. RP Singh can make all kinds of falseness and inane claims about the central helping out and all of that. The reality is that this was an arbitrary lockdown. The reality is that the migrant laborers were given no time. And remember, you are absolutely right to say they did not start walking home on day one. They started walking home when they had no jobs, when they had no money, they had no food. And the government didn't even think twice about what was happening to people who were stranded away from home in an emergency situation like this. Can somebody explain to me that why did Tushar Mehta, India's Solicitor General, mislead the Supreme Court of India by saying that not a single person is present on the road? Why did the government lie to the country and spokespersons like Mr. RP Singh make these boastful claims that they are paying for tickets, rail tickets, which they had to go back on? This could have simply been avoided because we have a tier 3 government. We have a central government, we have a state government, and we have a local government. Every Gram Panchayat Pradhan had to be asked, give us names of migrants, where they are stuck. This could have been easily worked out. Help could have been provided to them. The government turned a blind eye, and India will not forget the travesty of justice that we saw on our roads. Who can forget that little girl riding a bicycle and taking her father home all the way in Bihar? What are you going to tell her? Are you going to tell her a pack of lies today? This is an emotional issue for me. I come from a rural constituency, and so many people have had to walk back from places like Surat and from places like Bhopal. What are you talking about? Let's put our heads in shame that you tell Parliament, the highest institution in the country, that you don't have the record of people who have died as migrant laborers. You telling that they succumb to fake news? Shame on you.
Okay, 13 minutes, 14 seconds. Now,
let me just.
No, this can't go like this. 13 seconds, she didn't answer.
Mr. RP Singh, you really have to allow Mr. Rajiv Ranjan to come in. Please show some courtesy. I will come back to you, Mr. RP Singh.
From the respective district and left over the border.
You have spoken the
fair question. I will come back to you. We will address what individual state governments did. May I just go across to Rajiv Ranjan? Mr. RP Singh, my request to you, show some courtesy to the spokesperson of your ally, Mr. Rajiv Ranjan. Can it be denied? Can we deny the fact that because we failed to take care of these migrants in the states and in the cities where they were forced to walk back home? It was not fake news. It was because we forgot about them. And by the time we gathered our food and shelter, many of them were not getting any help from state governments. That's why they went back home.
देखिए तन्वी, आपने बिल्कुल सही कहा है और इसके दोनों ही पक्ष हैं। पहली बात तो ये है कि उन राज्यों में जहां मजदूर अलग अलग राज्यों से गए, वहां कई पीढ़ियों से उनमें कई मजदूर रहते हैं जो अपने अपने गांव या अपने घरों पर तभी आते हैं जब कोई उत्सव हो, कोई त्योहार हो, कोई शादी हो। तो इसलिए उनका एक घर मुंबई या दिल्ली या इस तरह के महानगर हुआ करते हैं या सूरत हुआ करता है। लेकिन उन राज्यों में जब कोरोना के कारण लॉकडाउन लागू किया गया तो फिर फैक्ट्रीज बंद हुए और मजदूरों को दिहाड़ी का भुगतान भी जो बकाया था उसका भुगतान करने से कंपनी के मालिकों ने ज्यादातर जगहों पर मना दिया। स्टेट गवर्नमेंट्स की जवाबदेही थी कि उनको दिहाड़ी का भुगतान कराएं या कोई एक सोशल सिक्योरिटी के किसी स्कीम के जरिए उनको पैसे दिलाएं और कहीं किसी नजदीक के स्थान पर उनको कम से कम 2 वक्त का खाना मिल सके। तो मुझे लगता है उससे काफी हद तक उनके पलायन को रोकने में मदद मिलती। दूसरी बात, जहां तक फेक न्यूज का सवाल है, इस पक्ष को भी महत्वपूर्ण माना जाना चाहिए, इसलिए कि अगर आप मुंबई को देखेंगी तो शिवसेना के सामना अखबार ने लगातार राज्य सरकारों को कोसने का काम किया जहां के मजदूर वहां ज्यादा बहुतायत में थे। दूसरी तरफ आनंद विहार टर्मिनल के विजुअल्स आपने खुद दिखलाए हैं और किस तरह से आपके कार्यकर्ताओं ने दिल्ली से उत्तर प्रदेश की सीमा पर लोगों को पहुंचने के लिए बाध्य किया और बहुत बड़ी बड़ी बातें पैनलिस्ट कह रहे हैं। लेकिन एक फेडरल स्ट्रक्चर में जहां केंद्र और राज्य दोनों की जवाबदेही वैश्विक आपदा से निपटने की है, केवल ब्लेम गेम हम कर रहे हैं और अपनी अपनी जवाबदेही हम दूसरों पर थोपने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं। क्या राज्यों की ये स्टेट सब्जेक्ट है या नहीं? हेल्थ अगर स्टेट सब्जेक्ट है तो हमारी जवाबदेही है। और राज्यों के जितने इलेक्टेड चीफ मिनिस्टर्स थे, प्राइम मिनिस्टर के साथ जितने राउंड मीटिंग्स हुए हैं, उसमें उन्होंने कभी भी केंद्र सरकार की योजनाओं पर कभी सवाल खड़े नहीं किए। उनकी पार्टी की ओर से बराबर बातें कही गई, लेकिन जो फोरम हो सकता था उस फोरम पर कांग्रेस के जो भी निर्वाचित मुख्यमंत्री थे वो चुपचाप केंद्र सरकार की योजनाओं के साथ खड़े दिखे। और कमोबेश ये 56 लाख लोगों को हिंदुस्तान के अलग अलग राज्यों में भारतीय रेल ने पहुंचाया। और जिस तरह से राजस्थान की सरकार ने केवल डीजल के भुगतान उत्तर प्रदेश की सरकार द्वारा नहीं किए जाने के बाद जिस तरह का पत्राचार किया और जिस तरह से मेस में रहने वाले बच्चों के साथ,
क्यों बोल रहे हैं आप बैठ के वहां पर?
आप मुझे सुनिए, मैंने आपको तो इंटरप्ट नहीं किया था। आप अपनी बारी पर बात कीजिए। मैं झूठ नहीं बोल रहा हूँ, आप सुनिए, आप सुनिए,
आप गलत बात कर रहे हैं।
आप सुनिए। अगर इस तरीके से बात करेंगी मैं बहस नहीं करने दूंगा। अगर इस तरह से बात करेंगी मैं बात नहीं करने दूंगा।
ओके, नो येलिंग प्लीज। नहीं, कैन आई ओनली हियर राजीव रंजन प्लीज नो येलिंग। एक मिनट इतना एंथुसियाज्म और पैशन अगर हम माइग्रेंट्स के लिए दिखा देते तो शायद प्रॉब्लम थोड़ी कम होती, बट चलिए वो तो अब बात बीत गई। राजीव रंजन जी, लेट्स लिसन टू राजीव रंजन and then we will go one by one to the other panelists. For only Rajiv Ranjan, please. Yes.
देखिए, अब मैं कुछ चीजें कहना चाहूंगा। मेस में जो हॉस्टल में रहने वाले बच्चे थे, राजस्थान में कोटा और कुछ अन्य शहरों में भी, बिहार और उत्तर प्रदेश, देश के अलग अलग हिस्सों से कई बच्चे वहां थे। और जैसे ही लॉकडाउन हुआ, हॉस्टल के कुक और जो भी वहां के कर्मचारी थे उनको छुट्टी दे दी गई, इससे कि जब अकाउंट में पैसे समय पर नहीं मिल रहे थे उनको ये लगा कि ये बहुत ही फायदे का व्यापार नहीं है, इन बच्चों पर अगर हम खर्च करें और पैसा नहीं मिलेगा तो उन्होंने स्थितियां ऐसी पैदा कर दी कि बच्चे किसी तरीके से वहां निकलने के लिए मजबूर हुए। और मुंबई, मैं एक बात जरूर कहना चाहूंगा, ये बार बार बोलते हैं कि 10 बाई 10 के खोलियों में यहाँ मजदूर रहेंगे तो कैसे बचाव करेंगे। मैं ये कहता हूं कि वहां की खोलियां अगर 10 बाई 10 है तो इसकी जवाबदेही उत्तर प्रदेश या बिहार की है। ये जवाबदेही उनकी क्यों नहीं है जिन्होंने महाराष्ट्र को समृद्धियों के शिखर पर पहुंचाया, मुंबई और महाराष्ट्र के शहरों को जिस तरह से विकास की नई ऊंचाइयों पर पहुंचाया, उसमें अगर मजदूरों की या कामगारों की भूमिका नहीं है तो फिर आप उनको क्यों रखते हैं वहां? और जब मुश्किल वक्त आया तो आपने पल्ले झाड़ लिए किसी तरीके से। लॉकडाउन की धज्जियां उड़ाकर जब लोग बांद्रा में जमा हो रहे थे तो उस समय मुंबई पुलिस क्या कर रही थी लॉकडाउन का, जब धज्जियां उड़ रही थी?
ठीक है, ओके, बट मैं एक पॉइंट बहुत क्लियर कर दूं कि जो श्रमिक ट्रेन्स अनाउंस हुई वो मई के महीने में जाके अनाउंस हुई, लॉकडाउन के 1.5 महीने बाद, और वो ट्रेन्स 8 मई से शुरू हुई। तब तक तो सिचुएशन बहुत खराब हो ही चुकी थी। और सेंटर के पास कोई ऑप्शन नहीं था. Now, to the points raised about Maharashtra and Rajasthan, let's get responses. Supriya first and then Mahesh Tapase. Yes,
No, can I add
Supriya.
a
The
small
fact of the
point here?
matter
Can I add
is
a-
that
can I-
we
can I
fail
make
to
a
take
small
care of
point?
them in states like Rajasthan. No, I need a response. In the states like Rajasthan, we failed to take care of them in Maharashtra, which is why they wanted to go back home. That's the charge.
That's an absolutely nonsensical charge, and I will tell you why that's nonsensical. It is not just lack of food, money, and employment opportunities. Put yourself in the shoes of people who are thousands of kilometers away. This is an unknown enemy. One doesn't know when the corona crisis will end in September. We are sitting in September. This government was supposed to control things in 21 days. They were centralizing everything. They were not letting even the states take decisions. Forget about the local governments. When the situation got out of control, इन्होंने पलड़ा झाड़ के चुपचाप किनारे हो गए. आज 50 लाख से ज्यादा केसेस है राजीव रंजन जी. और आप तो बिहार से आते हैं, मैं उत्तर प्रदेश से आती हूँ, तो मैं आपको एक चीज और बता देती हूँ. हमारे यहाँ से तो सबसे ज्यादा मजदूर बाहर जाते हैं. और क्यों जाते हैं? क्योंकि बिहार और उत्तर प्रदेश में सुशासन बाबू ने बिहार में और उत्तर प्रदेश में तमाम लोगों ने,
और मेरा जब जवाब सुनेंगी तो फिर आपके पास इसका कोई जवाब नहीं होगा. मैं कहूंगा कि बिहार और उत्तर प्रदेश को आपके एक फैसले ने पलायन की भूमि बना दी. आपके एक फैसले ने पलायन की भूमि बना दी. और वो 1953 का फ्रेट इक्वलाइजेशन पॉलिसी है.
Sir, as far as your chief minister is concerned,
आप फ्रेट इक्वलाइजेशन पॉलिसी पर एक्सप्लेन कीजिए पोजीशन. 1953 में आपका शासन था और फ्रेट इक्वलाइजेशन पॉलिसी ने बिहार में रोजगार लगने की सारी उम्मीदें खत्म कर दी. माइंस एंड मिनरल्स रिच एस्टेट में इंडस्ट्रीज नहीं लगे, इसके लिए आपने साजिश की और फ्रेट इक्वलाइजेशन पॉलिसी आपने लागू किया.
आपको आज
मैं क्यों चुप रहूंगा? डोंट डेयर. ऐसी बात इस तरह से मत बात कीजिए. इस तरह से बात मत कीजिए. आप महिला पैनलिस्ट हैं. आप बात करने की तमीज़ सीखिए.
May I just come in? Nobody can understand anything. किसी को कुछ नहीं समझ में आएगा. किसी को कुछ समझ नहीं आएगा. Supriya, Srinath, nobody is going to understand if everybody talks over each other. Please, can we just take a deep breath, take a little step back, and then listen to what the other side is saying? I'm not able to understand either you or Rajiv Ranjan at this point of time. The simple question is, Supriya, Srinath, people from Maharashtra, Karnataka, Gujarat, Rajasthan in large numbers began to leave, and they told us when we were out there reporting that that's because they didn't have any money, they didn't have any food, they don't know how they're going to get home, but because they've not eaten in days and they have no place to stay and no job, they have to go back home. Now, this is also a reality. As much as they wanted to run away, stay with their family in times of a pandemic when they don't know what's going to happen next, the fact also is that in many states they were not getting enough food and shelter or money.
Because you have dabbled for a little while in your journalism career in business news, I'm sure you will understand what I go and say next. And the reality is that at a time when the corona crisis was peaking, when the migrant crisis was exploding, the central government chose to have a very centralized decision-making policy. I don't know how the panelist says that chief ministers did not raise issues. Chief minister after chief minister raised issues of financial crunch. What were they made to do? They were made to go and borrow from the market or from RBI to the WMA at very exorbitant rates. Sir, please keep quiet. Mr. Arpit, I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to Tanvi Shukla. Please keep quiet. The reality is you may not understand what I'm saying. I appreciate that. One second, Mr. Arpit, maybe you don't understand what I'm saying. थोड़ा समझने की कोशिश करिए. आपके लिए अच्छा रहेगा. आपको आगे की डिबेट्स में मदद करेगा. Please don't shout. Why are you shouting?
झूठ बोलना बंद करिए आप. अभी
Are you having a panic attack, sir?
एक मिनट.
Discussing, are you having a panic attack? Why are you shouting? Why are you shouting?
I don't understand what's happening here. I'm sorry. I will have to step in here. And Mr. Rajiv Ranjan and Mr. RP Singh. Hold on a minute. Mr. Rajiv Ranjan, आप हमेशा इतने आराम से मेरी डिबेट्स में बात करते हैं. आप इतने रेगुलर गेस्ट हैं मेरी डिबेट्स में. आज आपको क्या हो गया? इतने उत्तेजित क्यों हो रहे हैं आप? मुझे मालूम है इलेक्शन पास आ रहा है बिहार में, लेकिन डिबेट
तन्वी जी
नहीं, पर कोई भी हो सामने, आप कभी इतने उत्तेजित नहीं होते राजीव रंजन जी. आज भी ना हो तो अच्छा है. आरपी सिंह, लेट्स नॉट फॉरगेट आरपी सिंह. जी, thank you. Now है तो, and
देखिए, मैं
let's not
आगे भी नहीं
forget that
होऊंगा,
the
लेकिन
mass
आपको
exodus
बाकी
happened
पैनलिस्ट से
not
भी
just from
बोलना
Congress
चाहिए।
rule statements.
मुझे केवल आप 10 सेकंड एक बात कहने के लिए देंगी?
जी, नहीं,
आप अगर केवल पॉइंट स्कोर करना
जी,
है, तो बहुत बड़ी-बड़ी बातें हम कह देते हैं। आपने सुशासन बाबू को ब्लेम कर दिया, लेकिन बिहार के भाग्य में पलायन तो आपने दर्ज किया 1953 में। उस समय के जो फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर थे टीटी के कृष्णा मेनन, जिन्होंने प्रेट इक्वलाइजेशन पॉलिसी लागू किया, और माइंस एंड मिनरल्स बिहार में पूरी तरह से भरे हुए थे,
नहीं, वो
और
आपने
बिहार
बोल,
के इंडस्ट्री
ठीक है, वो
साउथ इंडिया
पॉइंट,
और
हाँ, तो
वो
मुझे,
वेस्टर्न इंडिया में गया, और ये लोग
हम
पलायन
किसी
पर
और
बात
दिन,
करेंगे।
आपने सही पॉइंट बोला, किसी और दिन बात करेंगे that why do people from states like Assam, Bengal, Bihar and Uttar Pradesh migrate to other states and cities for jobs. Let's have that debate another day. Mr. R.P. Singh, don't forget, every time you blame the states, that states ruled by the BJP, including Karnataka and Gujarat, saw similar crisis. In fact, apart from Delhi, Surat was one of the first places where massive crisis unfolded on streets, even including violence, because people wanted to go home. They were that desperate. So if we are going to say that the states failed, it also failed. The states also failed where BJP is in power. Now, Mahesh, Tapase, one of the biggest states with a large number, and I'm sure you have the number of how many migrant workers are in the state of Maharashtra. The government was constantly giving us exhaustive details of how much of money is being used in bringing in ration and how much of that ration is reaching people. Still, so many of them went home. Can you today deny that perhaps the state government was not able to take care of all of them, which is why they went home?
I will not give 100% weightage to what is being put up over here. Always remember that whenever there is a pandemic, there is a pressure from the household, pressure from the father, the mother, the wife, and the brothers and sisters who are in the villages. For the person who's gone to win bread to another state, another city, to come back home, at least the parents want to see that their son is at least in front of their eyes. So this was the major reason. If you ask any migrant worker, see Maharashtra has workers coming from Madhya Pradesh, from Rajasthan, from West Bengal, from UP, from Bihar, and all the migrant workers say that Maharashtra is their karma bhumi. So we are happy that we are one of the major employers for the workers in this country. But at the same time, when a pandemic of such magnitude has happened across the nation, we have to understand the psychology of every Indian, every person, including you and me. We were all scared. We didn't know what's going to happen. We didn't have trains. There were no, I agree to one point that at the beginning of the pandemic, things were not planned because nobody knew. Initially, we thought it's a 7-day lockdown, which my government had announced a 7-day lockdown. Then the Prime Minister said that no, it's a 15 to 20 days lockdown. And we were all kind of caught unaware to the problems that would suddenly come with the lockdown. Food was, yes, one of the major problems. Shelter, yes, people already living. At that time we didn't have the rain, so luckily that was not much of an issue. But the problems associated with the virus were threatening people in such a way. We had videos coming from China and WhatsApp videos that this is the virus and this is the way people are dying. So many dead bodies are scattered across the globe, in Europe, in so many other parts of the world. So that really created a lot of panic in the minds of the people, not only in Maharashtra, but I guess across the nation. People were all gripped with fear, including me, because we didn't know anything about the virus. It has one strain or 10 strains or 11 strains. Today also we are not 100% sure what the virus is and what is the possible cure. Yes, at that time people were threatened, people were scared, people wanted to go back to their families. There was no provision from the railways. We tried to intervene whatever best we could do. There was a complete lockdown on the movement of surface transport in all possible ways. We tried to restart our bus system and people could go, but that was only limited to initially the districts of Maharashtra. Then the central government gave us permission to transport them beyond the borders of Maharashtra state. So yes, there were problems, and I guess rather than mudslinging and rather than blaming this government and that government, I guess I think that we all should have shown that kind of coordination in such a way that the migrant people who lost their lives, and today it's very shameful that in the parliament we are not able to give the numbers how many people actually lost their lives, how much money was collected, how much money was spent. So it's all very vague. And I'm surprised that probably this is one of the reasons why the question hour was cancelled. It's a natural thing that comes in my mind that the government cancels question hour because it knew that during this time when the parliament is going to be in session, all these questions are going to be put up across to the government, and they had absolutely no answer to this. And yes, as far as the
Let me,
food is concerned,
as I go across to Mr. R.P. Singh, refresh our memories, refresh the memories of our panelists.
One more point. As far as food about the migrant workers in the state of Maharashtra, we had the Chef Thali, which was introduced by this Mahavikas Agadi, initially costing 10 rupees to the normal people, which was reduced at 5 rupees. And all the DMs, the district magistrate, district collector, superintendents of police, they were told to maintain police station-wise details of migrant workers when the Shramik train started, and food packets were given to them. I'm not saying that 100% people probably got a stomach full of food, but yes, I can definitely assure you that most of the people, nobody was left, starving. Yes, there would have been some breathing troubles in the
No, okay. So let me say, what I'm going to pick up from your answer, Mr. Mahesh Tapase, is this. Let's admit today that states and the center failed to do a good enough job. Let's not be in denial. Let's not deny the fact that this problem wasn't anticipated when the lockdown was announced. There was no provision made until the Anand Vihar fiasco took place. Then after that, we took another 6-8 weeks before the trains began. There was no coordination between state governments in terms of transport. Who's paying the ticket price for the railway train? Who's going to be facilitating the buses? States were facilitating buses from one border to the other and then abandoning these migrants on the border, saying, now go find another bus and get home. However, that's how it was happening. It was chaos. It was inhuman. It was painful to watch. And it went on for weeks together. It went on for weeks together while political parties and state governments fought with each other. While political parties and state governments fought with each other, we didn't know who was actually on ground going to resolve the issue. Now, Mr. R.P. Singh, can we today at least acknowledge what Mahesh Tapase is saying, that the states and the center could have done a better job? Can we please not call this panic triggered by fake news, but admit that yes, we didn't do enough for them? We're probably not even doing it now because we don't even know how many of them lost jobs, how many of them died on the way, how many of them have come back, how many of them have managed to avail benefits of our scheme.
Okay, Tanvi, let me give you, we are debating, I done little research on the Google. 24th March was the date when the first lockdown was announced for 21 days. Here's your paper, Times of India, 28th March. Anand Vihar fiasco created by the Aam Aadmi Party, the first fiasco of the migrant labor. And that's how it triggered and it went into a spiral into other states. First one was on 28th March. Because Tanvi, give me a second, please. Because I stay in Delhi, I knew it. And it was happening in front of us. The Aam Aadmi MLAs were telling their job, because they didn't want to fulfill their duty. Is it because Center has announced a packet and then said that you ensure that you support Thali? Center is giving food free. I mean, even now the food is free for the migrant laborers. They didn't forward their food. And the problem is that Center was providing for it. They had made provision for it. Their delivery mechanism was the state. They failed to do it. Rather, they pushed the workers. I'm saying 28th March, 24th March, the lockdown was the fourth day. Panic was created on the fourth day itself, the first panic. The reason was they knew that they can't control it, they can't manage it. Better is throw them out, send them out of the state, so we will be off them, and we won't be needed to take care of them. And your channel would have done a lot of coverage how migrant laborers were treated on food, on food delivery. How food was not reaching out to them. The basic need. When the center was giving the full support of free food to be distributed. So, that's how the panic started. And that was all because of fake news spread. पता नहीं कितने दिन रुकना पड़ेगा. कब तक खुलेगा?
No, Mr. No.
RP Singh ji, I just want to
No,
ask
so
one small
that there was
question.
not fake news,
Can
Mr.
you
RP
tell me
Singh,
what-
because the
Can-
lockdown did
ये
get
आपकी
extended.
सारी सर,
Mr.
ये
RP
सारी
Singh,
सर,
there is no
मार्च का
fake
30
news.
है, ये मैं नहीं
Fake
कह रहा।
news.
और
1 minute,
ये
please.
सारे
I can't
ये
understand
आप-
anything. Can I?
Tanvi, I'll send
Can
this
I?
to you. This is your newspaper.
Can I
It's
make a
telling
point,
about the fake
please?
news. Please. Sorry, please.
Can I please make a point? The lockdown did get extended. The lockdown was announced for 3 weeks. It got extended again and again and again. At the end of the day, it was a lockdown, and everybody who understood why it was being done understood that it will be there for several weeks now, Mr. RP Singh. Now, you raised the timeline. Okay, let's talk about the timeline.
Come on, Tanvi, 4th
Everything.
24th.
Yes, yes, of course the fourth day. Of course the fourth day. But the migrant exodus is not limited to those 1,000 people who turned up at the Anand Vihar bus stand that night on March 28th. I'm sorry. Are you taking away from the fact that people walked all the way from Maharashtra, from Punjab, all the way to Bihar and West Bengal? Let's not please, Mr. RP Singh, let's not be in denial of what has happened here. I am shocked that we are still arguing and still making this point about fake news. Here is the timeline. Listen to the complete timeline, please. March 24th, 25th, the lockdown was announced for 3 weeks. March 28th was the first instance where these people landed up at the bus stand, because yes, buses had been arranged and that information had been put out that there are buses that are being arranged for you to go home. Too many of them turned up. That's not fake news. That's not fake news. That is not fake news. Now, April 15th. Please don't interrupt me. Don't interrupt me. I am not going to allow this at all. Can I just speak to my viewers, please, without any of this yelling? Unnecessary interruptions, sir. Let's look at the timeline. Let's have a sane conversation about it. I do not want to yell. April 15, National Lockdown 2.0 was announced. This was on April 15th. April 17, Uttar Pradesh was the first state to send buses to bring students back from Kota. Students, not migrants. April 21st, Maharashtra state government demanded special trains to take migrants back home to their home states because they didn't want to stay back, they wanted to go home. April 29th, Maharashtra got their own buses to bring students back from Kota. April 30th, Punjab, Bihar, Rajasthan, Telangana asked for special trains to ferry the migrants back. And then the trains were announced in the first week of May. They started from 8th of May. National lockdown was announced, the extension 3.0 on May 4th and 4.0 on May 18th. The migrant crisis was still going on. So please, let's not say that for 2 months where people were walking on the streets, it was because somebody on March 28th told them that this is going to have forever. We have to see, as the lockdowns got extended, as the loss of job continued, as money ran out, as people became impatient, wanted to get back to their families, as they wanted to go back to their home villages, find a job there, the numbers increased. That's the reality. Every time the lockdown was extended, more of these migrant workers wanted to go home. And for weeks together, we didn't even think about that. Even then, the states are fighting amongst themselves. You are not taking care of them, you are not taking them. I don't want them, you keep them, no, you keep them. That's what was happening. Now, let me come to the second point very quickly. And I want Mr. RP Singh to give us an answer. Think about it, Mr. RP Singh. Supriya Srinath, since you also have an understanding of how business works and how government schemes works. 6 months after the lockdown, is it right for the government to say that we don't know how many lost their jobs, how many actually got benefit of the financial assistance, even after having announced so many schemes?
Which is why I say this government is still living in denial, and which is why I say this government does not understand the plight of the poor. There are so many people who've lost their jobs. Forget about everybody else. Salaried employees, over 2 crore employees have lost their jobs. The government says they don't know.
The government of the day is supposed to keep data, but guess what? This government doesn't believe in data. They have always denied data. They have always manufactured or spill data, and which is why they say they don't have data today. That's the government's job. It was so easy to track migrants, Tanvi, and with all due respect to whoever is in power, I say there are 3 tiers of government. You could have got the local government activated, figured out where the migrants were, given them time to go back. And I will go back to saying this whole debate that is being done by the ruling party and the answer that has been given in parliament comes from a place of privilege. We are very privileged to have seen a very comfortable life through the lockdown. We are saying they feared out of panic. They panic out of fear. They walked for 1,500 kilometers. They have fortitude. They have strength of character. They did not fear. They told us what real India is. We should bow before their fortitude instead of telling them that they ran out of fear due to fake news. It's such a shame on the government to say so. 6 months after the lockdown, 6 months after making false promises, this government says they don't have data. I have very little to say because India can see what is happening.
Okay, yes, Mr. R.P. Singh, when will we get clarity on what is the current status with these migrants? How much of help reached them? How many lost their jobs? How many died on their way home?
My learned panelists feel ashamed when the Rajasthan government doesn't work, when the Maharashtra government leaders provoke people to go back and then tell them you better go back, it's not good to stay here in respective states. She doesn't feel ashamed then. But coming back to the issue, as government has said that more than 8 crore people were provided with food by the central government schemes, respective states which are active, like UP and Bihar, both are active states, they are already taking care of the labor which has gone there, the migrants which have gone there. They are providing them jobs, and also central government has done a job on Manrega where the wages are increased as far as Manrega goes, and also that the specialized training has been given to their respective states. If they want to stay back in the state, they'll be given jobs. UP and Bihar both have assured that they'll be given jobs in their respective states now, and both the states are working on it. But what about the states which have thrown them out? What about, and there can, I'm not saying there can be states which have BJP rule also, but what about the states like Rajasthan, like Punjab, Maharashtra, which are the major providers for the people who come from these states, from UP and Bihar? The whole agriculture sector in Punjab depends on
Okay.
UP and Bihar. Whole of the manufacturing sector in Maharashtra depend on UP and Bihar. And who is responsible? Has she answered on my colleague from the JDU saying that who is responsible for that? Why did people started migrating from UP and Bihar? It's our government which is ensuring that next time the migration doesn't happen. People are coming back, should be given respective jobs in their respective states. Ma'am, I haven't interrupted you. Please stop heckling. But you have a bad habit. I mean, and you under a grab of being an ex-journalist, you are a heckle. You're no more a journalist, you're a political panelist. Behave like a political panelist.
Don't get frustrated. Don't let your frustration show. Aram se debate kariye.
I'm not frustrated. It's your frustration. You always behave like a
Okay.
now. You're no more a
No
journalist.
time for this, Tutu meme, please. I'm completely out of time. I'm completely out of time. I'm going to thank all of my panelists for joining us. It's been an intense conversation. I can feel it in my throat now with all this yelling that happened. But honestly, viewers, this is what I think. Yes, even in our daily lives, we often don't think about the people who live around us, not as privileged as us, going through a tougher time. It's their life. For many of them, this walk from Mumbai to Patna would have been just another tough challenge because every day for them is that difficult. But for us to be in denial of how bad and how tough it was for them and that we didn't react on time, didn't take action on time, but for us to say that this is because there was fake news that triggered their need and their wish to go home would be unfair. Let's acknowledge the fact. Many of them wanted to go back home to their families, to be with their loved ones. They knew there was no job here. There was no money being earned here. They'd rather go back home. Many of them ran out of food, ran out of a shelter, didn't have a job. They wanted to go back home. And we didn't plan this in time. Yes, it was an unprecedented situation. None of us could have predicted it. But once we began to see what was happening on ground, we could have moved faster rather than indulging in politics and pointing fingers at each other. States and the center failed the migrants then. Even now, we are not getting clear answers from the government. Think about it. Thank you for joining us on this conversation.